House District 64. This is going to be a new thing I'm going to be trying to do every week, a little video segment, kind of in addition to the weekly newsletters that I do via email. This will be mostly on social media, but I want to keep everyone apprised on what's going on, not only at the Capitol now that we're out of the Capitol, but also just throughout our state and potential new legislation that'll be coming next year, but mostly to give you kind of a heads up and a pulse on what's going on in our legislation with our legislators throughout these election months coming up, and also just what we have to look forward to next year as it pertains to the last 2 years especially. If you remember last year's session, it was pretty bad. That was my first year in office, and I was pretty surprised at how bad the legislation actually was going, and some of the legislators in office that really should not be there, and how horrible some of the legislation that was being pushed actually made it through. I was very surprised that this year actually surpassed last year's stupidity as far as legislation went. It was disheartening to see even worse legislation, and even some of the legislation we saw last year come back in worse form and still make it further than it did last year. Some of it getting killed, others making it into law. But again, this is just, it was a horrible year in seeing how bad legislation can actually be. I've told a lot of people throughout the session this year, it's like the Democrats were just taking a handful of crap and throwing it at the wall and seeing what would stick, and then giggling and doing it over again, over and over and over until the end of session. So what doesn't need to be said, we had a horrible fight. I mean, we were battling strong all the way through session, being outnumbered 46-19. Our mighty 19 did exceptionally well in defending a lot of those bills that went through, at least beating them up before they went to the Senate, or after they came from the Senate before they went to the governor. And we were able to kill a few. So, I mean, accepting our small victories where we could, but small victories in the big picture are unacceptable, and we need to do better at picking better candidates to serve in our legislature next session. So I hope everyone's remembering that in November. Getting into some of the bills that I ran this year, House Bill 24-1016, that was the Defined Personnel for Emergency Telephone Services. Basically, that one helped, it classifies emergency dispatchers as first responders. This is a big thing because up until now, dispatchers were considered clerical personnel. Absolutely not clerical personnel. They are, in fact, the first responders. They're the first person you talk to when you call 911 and when you're in crisis or in an emergency. So now they're finally in Colorado classified as first responders, and rightfully so. It's about time. I'm glad we got it when we did. Wish we could have done it sooner. Another one, House Bill 24-1045. That is the Treatment for Substance Use Disorders. This one was big for me. I'm on the Opioid and Other Substance Use Disorder Committee. On the interim, last session we did a lot of work in the area of treatment and recovery. My focus is treatment because I think that in Colorado is broken. We are on the bottom of the list for success in mental health and substance use treatment, addiction treatment. So it was good to get on this bill and make it what it could be. Basically, it offers an incentive for judicial districts that offer diversion programs for people that are struggling with addiction and mental health and have low-level crimes that are related to addiction and mental health, so that they aren't clogging up our jails. They're actually getting the treatment that they need, so they're not reoffending, going in and serving a day or a couple weeks in jail, getting right back out and offending again, and going right back to jail. So that's a huge cost saver as far as the difference in treatment costs throughout a year for a person versus incarceration for a person throughout a year. It's completely a money saver in what you end up spending. A story I heard on that was $1 million man, a guy that was, I think it was in South Dakota, obviously a conservative state. Colorado is not a conservative state, but they had a gentleman that was struggling with addiction and mental illness. He was constantly being taken to the hospital, usually because of an arrest. Released from the hospital, taken to jail, booked, released, back out on the street. that cycle continued on a weekly, sometimes daily basis, 365 days a year, it cost over $1 million a year in just being able to treat this person in the hospital, take him to jail, release him, and then repeat over and over again, instead of getting him the long-term treatment that he needed, which would have cost far less and also would have probably helped the individual to maybe become a functional member of society rather than a drain on society by simply being that homeless person on the street corner. So a big thing for me. I was proud of that, proud to be a part of it. Another one, House Bill 1074. That was a repeat of last year. We did the punishment for harming or killing a police animal last year. That got through. We were able to get the penalty raised to a felony for harming or killing a police animal, and also restitution to the agency. Being former canine myself with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, I know that it can cost somewhere in a ballpark of $200,000 to get a dog patrol ready within the first year in an agency. All the training and man hours that it goes into, let alone purchasing the dog at $10,000 or $20,000 from a kennel, is pretty substantial, and that's not something that an agency is ready to do if a dog is killed or harmed to where they're taken out of the line of duty. This year we were able to differentiate standard animal cruelty and aggravated animal cruelty to a police animal, so that can be used as a different sentence in court. Judge and the district attorney may see that differently, may charge or may sentence differently based on that. So I think that's another thing that'll help those cases being pled down to nothing, maybe actually getting some sticking consequences, which is something we absolutely don't see in Colorado because of all the weak DAs and judges we have around the state and legislators that aren't willing to raise penalties for criminals. Another one, House Bill 1087. That's the professional endorsement of special ed teaching, getting in the education side. We do struggle in Colorado with the basically being able to fill positions for special ed teachers. We're on an extreme shortage in Colorado of special ed teachers. This helps kind of streamline the training and certification that a professional teacher can go through, rather than having to go back through school to get their certification for special ed after they've already become a professional teacher. So incentivizing them, for those that get into it because they want to be special ed teachers, they don't have to burden themselves by going back to school. They can simply get online and do the required certification and everything in a fraction of the time that it takes them to go back to school and get that specialization in special ed with a lot of on-the-job training. So I think that was a great thing to help bridge that gap and help fill some of those seats of special education teachers that we so desperately need in Colorado. Another one, House Bill 1093, the Peace Officer Provisional Certification Requirements. This is going to be something that will help military personnel that are serving in some sort of military police capacity. They go through a lot of the similar training that we do in civilian law enforcement. Myself being a former Army military police officer and civilian law enforcement, I had to go through post. I had nothing transfer over because currently the statute said excluded military training. We just simply took that language out so that it doesn't exclude military training, and the Post Board of Colorado can determine what training from the military can translate over to law enforcement post certification. So that'll help minimize some of the hours people have to take to get their post certification or provisional post certification. So I think that'll be a great one to help our veterans and help our law enforcement in recruiting. Another one, House Bill 1104, that's prohibiting firefighter personal info on the internet. So doxing firefighters has become a thing. When somebody loses something or loses property, they somehow feel like they're mistreated by fire and medical personnel that respond to an incident, and then they find out the firefighter's information and they can get it online and find them, post that publicly, things like that. So that would prohibit that, so that we can take care of our first responders and firefighters that are helping us stay alive in our moments of crisis. House Bill 1139, death benefit for state employees' surviving spouses. This one, very, very important to me as well. We were able to continue death benefits for surviving spouses of state law enforcement officers that were killed in the line of duty. Getting to meet some of those surviving spouses was very emotional and very helpful in getting me 100% invested in this bill. It was great to see we were able to get it through. It's a very minimal impact cost-wise because this isn't something that happens very often, thankfully. But when it does, we want to make sure those spouses that have kids, whatever, are able to continue those benefits even if they remarry after losing a spouse. And at some point they can get on with their life without having to worry about losing benefits for their kids that are left behind by a fallen police officer or state law enforcement officer. Let's see, House Bill 1162, penalty for theft of firearms. Guess what? Democrats don't like raising penalties. I try to raise it from a petty offense to steal a handgun. That's only a $300 fine. No probation, nothing else. $300 fine for getting caught stealing a handgun. Unacceptable. I wanted to make it a minimum felony to steal a firearm because guess what? Stolen firearms are used in violent crimes. There's a vast majority of violent crimes that are committed have them using a stolen firearm. So I tried to do that. I even tried, after they said it was going to fail in committee, I tried to lower it down to an M2, which still raises it from a petty offense, second class 2 misdemeanor. It died in committee, didn't see the light of day. So that, I'm gonna try and do that again with a little bit more help and see if we can help bring some common sense into the Judiciary Committee and into the Colorado House of Representatives. That is the super majority of Democrats. So pray for me on that one. House Bill 1250, driving improvement course for driver's license points. This is for people that get low traffic offenses, low-level traffic offenses. They can opt in to take a driver education course or some sort of a driving course rather than lose points on their license. I think this is important because if anyone has spent more than 2 minutes on I-25 in Colorado, you know how stupid people drive. So it is important that people are getting continued training in driving because holy cow, it is dangerous out there. I ride a motorcycle and I have near-death experiences almost daily if I'm on I-25 on my motorcycle. I've lost too many friends on motorcycles and in vehicle accidents based on people that are driving inappropriately, distracted, whatever. So I think this is a good opportunity for people just to say, hey, maybe I need to get some new training as a driver, rather than continuing bad habits and hurting or killing people. House Bill 1431, stable housing for survivors of abuse. This was a good one. The money for this was already earmarked through TANF. It's basically providing housing for people that are survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. They can get away from their abusers. If anyone's worked in law enforcement and victim advocacy, you know those people that are affected by this often get back in that cycle. It's that cycle of abuse. They are welcomed back in, they're pulled back in, they're threatened to come back into those relationships, and then they're abused again. It's just the circle or cycle of abuse. Getting them out of that and funding housing, that's usually the biggest barricade for people to get through is, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? I have no money, this or that. To take their kids and get them into a safe house. This will help do that. I think this is a great opportunity. Just taking care of victims. I know we can't always affect the criminals in Colorado because of how blue this state is, but the best thing that we can do is at least take care of those victims of those criminals, the violent criminals, to get them away from them and hopefully get those criminals punished at some point or another. House Bill 1445, probation and parole reporting and fee conditions. This is basically taking what has been happening since COVID, people being able to, on parole or probation, report in virtually rather than in person, because people that were having to report in person oftentimes wouldn't make it and sometimes would be remanded back into custody and go back into jail. This helps prevent recidivism, gives them the opportunity to fulfill their probation and parole. And otherwise, if they aren't able to afford the fees, they can be billed for them, but they don't have to go back to jail based on that as well. So this helps free up some of the space in our jails for the real criminals, not the people that are trying to rehabilitate outside and become functioning members of society again. Don't get me wrong, this isn't for the violent criminals, this isn't for the big offenders, this is for the incentive program for those that are doing good on probation or parole. They're the ones that are the good students of rehabilitation and parole and probation, not the dirtbags that are out there committing crimes on a regular basis. Let's see, House Bill 1458, creating the Division of Animal Welfare in the Department of Ag. This is going to be focused on equine specifically. This isn't something that's going to be affecting ranchers. I got on this bill because everyone on this bill, House and Senate, other than me, was a Democrat. I didn't want this to go the wrong direction. I know we have some wackos out there that are trying to lead certain things in animal welfare that can really affect ranchers, even something as simple as bobbing tails on sheep. That's something that needs to happen for hygiene purposes. Calling that animal cruelty. There's a certain extreme I wanted to make sure this didn't get to. I think we did good in preventing a lot of that, but I think this will be a good thing for horses throughout Colorado in another division in the Department of Agriculture. So good bill there. 1006, impeachment of Colorado's Secretary of State, Jena Griswold. That was very important to me. That was a resolution that I brought forward with our minority leader, Rose Puglisi. We knew going into this it wasn't going to pass, like most things, in punishing people for their actions in our Colorado House of Representatives. They don't like holding people accountable for their actions unless they're Republicans. So that was important to me. I wanted to make sure she would at least heard it. It needed to be heard. It needed to be public. But we held her accountable for everything that she did and said throughout her wackadoo, just completely partisan politics that she plays as our chief elections officer of the state. Should be a nonpartisan position. I hope to run legislation to fix that someday. But in the meantime, she needs to be held accountable for how much of a partisan hack she is and how she erroneously sends out these ballots and voting applications and everything to people that aren't even citizens, saying that it was an accident and this and that. We all know better. Those accidents don't happen as just completely blatant as that did and the other mistakes that she makes, but she's completely ridiculous on social media and outside in her official capacity and needed to be held accountable. She still does it to this day, but it needed to be heard, needed to be brought more attention to, and I hope people remember that next time she's up for election and we get somebody with a brain running to take that seat from her. She doesn't belong there or anywhere else in any position of power. Senate Bill 194, that's the Special District Emergency Services funding. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with some of the police chiefs around Colorado on a night we had a legislative reception with a lot of the chiefs from around the state. And one of the biggest complaints was funding. That's always an issue, but in this case, we were talking about some of the rural areas where their fire departments and ambulances were unable to respond to calls because they didn't have the money or equipment. They didn't have their vehicles up and running because they didn't have funding, which in most cases is funded by property tax. It's funded by developments. And in those areas that don't have a lot of property, the heavy rural areas, they don't have developments going up, they aren't getting that same funding. So this offered another program to give funding to those areas that aren't able to get it as is. So I think that was a great one as well. That one was signed by the governor already. Most of the rest of those have been sent to the governor, not signed yet, except for the death benefits for state employees, state law enforcement, and prohibiting firefighter personal info on the internet. That was signed already. The provisional peace officers, provisional certification requirements for military was signed, and our law enforcement animal bill was signed again as well. So the other one, the emergency dispatchers being considered first responders, was also signed. So good successful year on legislation, except for trying to raise penalties and hold criminals accountable as usual does not fly. Hopefully we can fix that this election year. Bills I helped kill, not directly, but indirectly, being able to get your voice heard, bringing people to the table in the People's House. All of you that came out to testify did a tremendous job on a lot of these firearms and anti-gun bills that came out. The assault weapons ban, biggest one of all, biggest victory we had. shut down Elizabeth Epps, shut down Timmy Hamas Hernandez. We were able to get them. That bill made it way too far, but I'm glad it got killed in the Senate. We beat it up as best we could in the House. But for everyone that came out, Rocky Mountain gun owners, NRA, and NSF, all of those agencies and entities that came out to speak against this bill and bring your people, all the people that follow those organizations, everyone's voice at the table made a difference there. So thank you, everybody that helped get that stupid assault weapons ban killed. That would have been terrible for Colorado. House Bill 1270, the liability insurance mandate for firearms owners. Again, a stupid bill, unenforceable, ridiculous. Thankfully, that died in the Senate. I think that one was vetoed. Either way, House Bill 1310, school safety measures. That was going to not allow law enforcement officers to carry, not just carry, but store firearms in on school grounds. So even your vehicle in school grounds. You have to park off of school grounds to store a vehicle or to store a firearm in there and then run out to your vehicle to respond to a threat that's inside the building. I can't believe how far some of these people go with the lack of logic and common sense to ban guns and otherwise public safety, anti-law enforcement, everything else. Thankfully, that one died. Holy cow. It's just, when you know you've gone too far and then you take it a step further, that's what our Democrats do in Colorado. We need to fix that. House Bill 1460, law enforcement misconduct. Leslie Herod, thank God, is gone from legislation. She is termed out. She is out. So we won't have to hear her anymore on any of these bills, but thankfully we got that one killed. That was incredible. I personally take responsibility for getting that one killed. That was a huge fight for me and my brother, Representative Gabe Evans. Gabe Evans and I were in the well fighting that one tooth and nail. It didn't make it out of the House. We killed it on third reading, and it was thankfully by a marginal vote. Thankfully it died. But that we shut that down. That was basically going to punish law enforcement without due process because of an accusation of another officer. I'm going to be running a bill similar to that next session. It will look a lot better. It's going to protect law enforcement, not punish law enforcement. We need to support our police officers. We need to protect public safety. We also need to protect our police officers from themselves. When you do have officers that are whistleblowers and they're mistreated, we have organizations like the FOP that are there for that. And when they aren't, we need to have some sort of a safety net, but we need to have due process across the board. None of that bill had anything pertaining or related to due process. Everyone deserves due process. And Leslie Herod is all about pitting officers against themselves, law enforcement agencies against themselves, disrupting and dismantling law enforcement, defunding law enforcement. She's gone, but this legislation thankfully is too. So glad that we could kill that. Bad bills that got through. We're talking about Senate Bill 3, Senate Bill 003. That's the CBI enforcing gun crimes. That one's pretty bad. That gives takes it out of the hands of local law enforcement and puts it in the hands of CBI, which doesn't do that. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be dangerous, and I think that's something that's a precedent that we don't want to set, and unfortunately it looks like we're going to, because that got through. It has been signed, I believe. Senate Bill 66, the merchant category code, same thing. It's unenforceable. It's another one of the ridiculous bills they got through. Not anything. Pay cash if you're going to go to a firearms manufacturer or firearms retailer, but sporting goods stores are still going to have a merchant category code when you use a credit card as a sporting goods store. It's not going to affect them. It's the retailers that are strictly firearms or firearms manufacturers that are going to take a hit on that. But they're going to take a hit on other things as well that we'll talk to in a minute. House Bill 1174, the handgun permit, concealed handgun permit restrictions. That's not going to affect the citizen so much as it is going to affect the instructors. So instructors have to go through a rigmarole of, getting through restrictions. But essentially, those of us that teach firearms through a nationally recognized organization like NRA or whatever else, we're going to be okay. In fact, it might help us make money because the people that are maybe out there that are teaching these classes erroneously or however, are going to lose business because of this. They have to get the requirements that are in this bill. I already had them, not a big deal for me. For most of us, 90% of the instructors out there, same thing. But they're going after some of the things that I think we've all seen. But if anyone wants to get a concealed handgun permit and wants to get that ridiculous 2-hour certification, those aren't legal anyway. Holding them accountable didn't need this bill to do that. This is just adding more restrictions to get concealed handgun permits to make less people armed, essentially. I don't think they succeeded there, so stupid bill. Senate Bill 131, sensitive spaces. This is the most ridiculous thing. So the bill title itself speaks for itself. But this is taking campuses. This was everywhere. This was going to be churches, everything. You wouldn't be able to carry a gun anywhere in Colorado because it would be considered a sensitive space. So the House sponsors of this bill were out of their minds. Unfortunately, it still got through minimally. It's only going to affect campuses and government buildings like the Capitol. There are county governments, things like that, that are saying that they aren't going to enforce this because it's unconstitutional. But this is, at least for state government, the state, of course, the Constitution isn't going to shred itself. So our House Democrats are doing it for them. So that one went through. It's still pending signature from the government. So is the concealed handgun restrictions pending signature. These ones that are pending signature, you can still write the governor, email the governor, call the governor, and urge him and his staff to make sure they look into this and how it's going to affect people. We don't just need to talk about the Second Amendment. We don't just need to talk about the same things that we're always hearing. How is it going to affect you personally? That's what people want to hear. That's what rings true the most. So be sure to call on those or email on those. House Bill 1349, the guns and ammo tax. It's another tax now for guns and ammo. It's going to push people to purchase out of state again. Just unfortunate. We're sending business away from Colorado by raising taxes. We can't keep raising taxes, even that, especially when it comes to firearms and ammunition. This is supposed to fund domestic violence victims. Okay, if we're going to fund domestic violence victims with a tax, how about the thing that causes domestic violence more often than not, which is alcohol? Tax alcohol. Why can't you tax alcohol if you want to fund domestic violence? People are going to buy that. People are buying ammo and firearms to protect themselves from violence. They're buying alcohol to enjoy alcohol, and that's more often than not, domestic violence is caused by somebody being intoxicated by alcohol or other substances. So tax that. Dumb bill. House Bill 1353, state permit for firearm shops. This screws our firearms retailers and manufacturers, our FFLs. They have to get not only their federal firearms license, but a state firearms license to be able to sell firearms. So it's another fee for them. It's another entity that's going to be inspecting them and auditing them. It's another invasion of people's personal information that are purchasing firearms. So horrible bill. That got through. It is also pending signature, so write the governor and call the governor on that one. And House Bill 1348, secure storage in vehicles. Funny story about this one. It was brought through at about the same time that my raising the penalty for theft of firearms was brought through. It made it, mine didn't. When it got to the Senate, a Democrat senator put my bill raising the penalty for theft of firearms as an amendment into that bill. It passed, and so that was going to make it a felony to essentially what my bill would have done as an amendment for secure storage of a firearm in a vehicle to prevent theft of firearms, right? No, she clearly, Lorena Garcia clearly wanted this to be a bill that affected gun owners, to make it more of an inconvenience to have your gun. Since you can't carry your gun anywhere, you have to leave it in your vehicle. It's not going to stop firearm thefts because if the firearm's in a gun box, the gun box gets stolen with the firearm. Common sense for most of us, but not for the Democrats like Lorena Garcia. So that passed, but the amendment failed. We went to conference committee twice. I was trying to get that bill amended with that because that was in fact my bill. I think I could have spoken the best to it, and it failed. But the bill almost died. Unfortunately, we were missing one Democrat senator that would have voted against it because of family stuff. He was unable to vote, and his vote would have counted, would have probably killed the bill altogether. But the bill got through, and it got whittled down to you can also store your firearm in your console or glove box if they're lockable, and it's only $100 civil infraction. It's unenforceable. There's no way anyone's going to know how you're storing your firearm in your vehicle, so it's just a stupid bill. All in all, it was a horrible session. I know this was a long video. Most of the videos in the future are going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. So please keep watching these. Don't think you're going to get overwhelmed with a half-hour video anymore. But follow my social media, all of it. There's certain social media, my official social media, I can't post campaign-related items on there. So follow all of my social media, sign up for the newsletter, keep watching these videos. There are going to be some upcoming events, so make sure you're watching on my campaign social media. You can also check out my website, www.armagost64.com. I'll see you June 1st at Johnstown Day and Bertha Day within the district here. Just take care. Everyone take care of yourselves. Stay involved, especially during this primary election and general election. Make sure you're getting people out. Make sure you're voting right. And take the time that you need to get involved with your candidates and follow them through to November. And just get out there and support them. Help with the door knocking, help with whatever you can. We need to bring some stability back into the state and get some of the stupidity booted from positions of leadership. It's gotten ridiculous. We need to get some stability back in the House and Senate. So keep it up. Keep up the fight. Next year, I hope to see the same faces in there. Let's keep doing this. But otherwise, I'll see you out there this summer. There'll be a lot of events I'll be attending, in-state and out-of-state, but I'm going to do what I can in the district here. Let me know if you want me to come stop by anything you're doing. I'd be happy to say hello and shake some hands. Take care. I'll see you next time.